you all saw. But wanted to get a sense from you all if you were okay with them moving forward, which is why he wrote to you all.
I understood that right. They recommended you apply for 4, and then they can take 3 and they can sell the other one.
Well, yeah,
Whoever furnishes them.
Depends on the amount of money that comes in.
No, but what I'm saying, the way I understood it, you order 4, but you can get 3, and the 4th, the dealer would sell it to somebody else.
yes. Yeah.
So they recommend that they apply for 4.
Yeah, they suggested that they apply for 4, but I think the reason that they are happy with staying with 3, for us certainly is because the vehicles themselves are, I think, about 45,000.
Yeah.
And then it costs almost another 20,000 to upfit them for all of the law enforcement equipment. So now you're at 65, and soon you're running out of money. So there's not enough money in the grant to pay for us to have 4. So that's why they're recommending us just keeping 3.
People have. You get stuck with the extra vehicle.
And there's no matching. This is straight out ARPA money. Everything's good. Well, I see.
As far as the purchase,
Absolutely.
outfitting vehicles, it falls back on us.
Well, it's inclusive in the grant.
That's included in the grant application, is my understanding. Now I haven't seen it yet. He's going to send it to me, but I haven't seen it yet. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great way for us to get through the grants.
The money, way things will pay for it, then we can be reimbursed by the grant.
I don't know if it's that or if they just, like our ARPA funds just arrived. And our tourism ARPA funds also just arrived. So I think it might be more the opposite, that the funds arrive and then you have, I'm not certain on that, but that's the way the state has been handling all of the other funds that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is to your point, that is the grant that they could have also applied for reimbursement for some old expenses. So I think it will allow going back. Yeah. I had hinted that it would be nice if they would include reimbursing for some ammunition, but I don't think that happened.
Didn't go very
It didn't go very far.
If you can get 3 new vehicles, I'll take the ammunition.
Right.
To have you.
It's almost as much as a vehicle.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's almost as much as a vehicle
Yeah, I get
at
it,
this
but-
point, but yes.
Yeah.
That's rational.
I think they were over
Logical.
20,000
Right.
ammunition this year.
Yeah,
I have my.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, they've spent over 20,000, I think, on ammunition this year. But to be fair, for the last couple of years, they've spent very little, mostly due to availability. So this is kind of checking things out.
well, as far as our budget, it shows a lot.
Oh,
And to my question, we're still leasing their other vehicles, right? Yeah.
yes, yes, and I think they're starting to move away from that model. But so in terms of the few vehicles we've bought from county administration, we've been starting to buy outright just because people here drive their vehicles a lot of miles. And my experience has been the only people that works really well for a lease vehicle is someone who lives in a big city that never moves their car or just doesn't move their car. The amount of miles that we are all running. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. That's it. That's good. Yeah, but then you end up with a big payment at the end. So I understand.
Very
Depend
good.
on what you're trying to pay.
I understand that. Yes, I appreciate that
I
background.
first started doing that his sister, Floyd,
Hmm?
and we was able to catch up.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, and I think that was part of Chad's concern and the sheriff's concern is so many vehicles were bought kind of at the same time or near the same time, that at least this way they can start moving towards having them spaced out a little bit more.
Okay.
Things have changed.
Yeah,
This was not a shot at
no.
him. So, they used to, it wasn't unusual to have a vehicle with miles on it, to be just as good shape as the brand new one off the show in Florida, it just wasn't shiny. And, but the manufacturers have changed their process.
You got better roads and. New last year, better.
Okay, so that was the first thing.
Just a consensus.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. We just wanted to make sure that you all weren't surprised and were okay with us taking this course. So appreciate that. The next item I had on here is, recently the chairman and I met with Angie from the ACE program, and I know that's something that's been included in your budget. And so we wanted to give you, and that was included in your recommended budget from us as well. So we have now, we want to give you an update. So we've now sent them, you probably saw in your last packet, the $10,000 you had committed for the current year. And so just to give you a little background in terms of numbers, when I guess you all started this in 2017-18, there were 22 students, then 36, 30, 43, 39, 38. And Kim went to a meeting, I guess, yesterday. And so they're thinking they'll probably about 30, 35 or so this coming year. So
Good.
it's been a good thing. And since, budgeting is always hard, it's good to know that some of your investments have been paying off the way you wanted.
And at least it's consistently, at the same, I mean, I'd love to have more, but,
Mhm.
it's consistent.
It is. Now there's been some pretty significant variation in how much tuition has been. And so Angie was going to go back and look at that a little bit more. But in any case, assuming you all continue with the similar contribution, they're able to match that with some other funds. We still do have access, or she does, to some funds through the Tobacco Commission, although they are, because they let folks use it if for studies, which is, in addition to just being general studies, is also, of course, how you get your first 2 years at community college. So she keeps fighting on that, but is not winning. So, and I remind you all, if you all didn't know, she and Mr. Hollingsworth went and spoke to the commission last year to try to get them to reverse that.
It's so short-sighted on the same.
Yeah.
They keep changing the goal. And turn around and change.
Yeah.
One of the best programs y'all ever started.
Well, and to Mr. Booth's point, so just to give you a couple more data points, the average GPA of the Floyd County ACE student graduate is 3.4.
Very good.
And the community service hours, so starting in the summer of 17, it was 1,760, then 2,880, 2,400. 1720, which was 2020, that was the big COVID year, so there was less. 3120, and this last summer was 3,040 hours. So if you total that all up,
Wow.
14, that comes to 14,920 hours of community service that has been done through the ACE program in Floyd County. And if you calculate it out, if we paid those folks the current minimum wage of $12, that is in-kind contribution to Floyd County and our nonprofits here, $179,040.
That's something
Also
else.
equates to over 7 full-time employees.
Yeah.
So,
Almost double from 17 to 22, almost.
mhm.
It would be 30.
For program.
Yeah, that's great in terms of community service hours. That's right, that's great.
So the let's see, now Kim and Jenny are the ones that are running up from the county side this year. And so on April 26th, they have an ACE meeting meet the students, get them in their packets, try to streamline the process a little bit. And then the career fair day is May 3rd. Last year we had 13 vendors. We're hoping we'll have a couple more this time, but so that included, Jacob with Parks and Rec, our EMS, fire, but then also a lot of the nonprofits, Angels, the Junebug Center. And Kim, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
You know, what I think is great is that the word is just getting out a little bit differently. So I foresee that vendor list growing,
Good.
you know, especially coming out of COVID and stuff, and people are talking,
Mhm.
you know. There's a new person that already has students who the students went to them, and then she contacted me because they want to do their volunteer worthy, meets criteria, all that. But even the students are out there promoting, you know, which is
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we need to look at, not this year, next year, increasing that amount.
Based on
Probably.
what Miss Covey was telling us, I think that might be good because there was and she was going to back and research it a little bit. It has something to do not only with the price increasing, but kids taking more credits. But so the cost between 21 and 22 went from 74,800 to 103 in tuition. And that's not all tuition increase. There's a bunch of other factors. She mentioned this year, for whatever reason, we have quite a few kids in the program that are getting no financial aid. So kind of how it works is, you get financial aid, and then kind of the middle group is the ACE money, and then of course is private pay. And so apparently this year's cohort, or like this current year's cohort 22-23, is more kids that don't qualify for FAFSA type financial aid, but do qualify for ACE. So they're just a little bit further up. And so that's part of what's made the change. So we're picking, and the program is picking up a greater proportion of their tuition.
But that lower section, what I'm thinking is not, they make changes to try and include more, but they haven't kept up. And so it's just like us in our tax relief,
Yeah.
that's the sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, that financial aid lower part hasn't kept up with the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how many kids would have fell through the cracks.
Yep.
Would not have got to college.
Yep.
That's right.
And then some of them are actually going out of high school with good paying jobs without even needing college. So I think that's where that lower end may have,
It's all very.
yeah, hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, though, it's a worthwhile program, and as I recall, Angie saying, the private donors that are very committed to this program want to make sure they see our commitment as well. But they're very, very much involved with it and want to continue to give. So that's something we got to keep in mind, because
Yeah.
that's very generous on the part of some families in our community that are.
We still have time, she said they were gonna look into it, but we need to come back with a number higher than what's in there, but we still have time to do that.
Yeah, I'll check with her at the commission meeting to see what she says.
It's sort of disappointing that more of our businesses didn't step up.
Yes.
Well, yeah, of course, she mentioned us. They haven't really asked a whole lot yet. So I think she was going to make a call to one of our larger employers. Part of the challenge, to the chairman's point, is, because of the Tobacco Commission funding, there's much more focus in moving kids into, STEM, the science, technology kind of stuff, math. And really, we don't have many employers in the county that are STEM type employers. And so trying to help make that match is a little bit more challenging where else is where the program, kind of originated and is much more expansive than ours, but their list of employers includes a lot of folks that this is how they help fund making sure their employers have employees. So,
I remember right, Gals was first and we was second.
Mm-hmm.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and nanotech. Yeah.
These,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I believe our biggest employer was really aware of this.
Yeah.
And I feel like once they become aware of it, she's awfully good on this county, helping the students.
Okay. The next thing I had was just to make you aware. Some folks came and met with me. We went to lunch at the country store, and before they met with me, they met with Brian and Chad Harris. And so they're part of something called Push Ministries, which works with inmates that are coming out of the local jails to provide a comprehensive plan for their success. And they also are some of the folks that the jail call and say, hey, this person needs a ride, they need housing. So they gave me a nice little packet of things. They have requested some funding from us. Their request was 2,000. I kind of told them we're pretty far down the line in the budget process, but I did commit that I would get up with the sheriff and Chad and kind of see what they thought some of the holes in our system might be that they could be helpful. And then, over time we would come back. But I've also asked them for some financial statements and all the things that we've been collecting from everyone else.
Correct.
So, but just wanted to let you know that was on the radar.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. And let's see. The next thing would be the just an update real quick on since you all have been suffering through our growing pains with .gov. Wanted to now that Danny's busy doing something else.
No, you're fine.
Let him tell you a little bit. See, this is the good news part. Right?
It's amazing.
Let you know some of why this has been a good decision.
So right now, with the .gov emails that we have open and running is let me bring it up here for you.
You can see a visual of this. It's
If you can kind of see this little screen here, all the little blue dots are attacks that on us that have come from around the world there, and so with the .gov, yes, so that that are those are attacks that have been caught by Barracuda attempts. So that's with our current .org. So when we go into here with the .gov accounts that we have open right now, sorry, I'm doing this left-handed. Yeah, as you can see, that's the difference in what we have. That's just from the security that's being offered, just from having that domain. So it's a big difference. So yeah,
well, going to .gov didn't cost anything
exactly.
other than
Yeah.
sweat.
Yeah, and a little bit of headache, but yeah. Yeah, that's the good thing is they have made it available for free. So
Every year.
Good job, Danny.
thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Totally wipes out anything.
A lot of yes, right. Yeah, that's a yeah. Yeah, it's a big thing to have the backing of the federal with that. Yes.
Which checks off a lot of the issues with the electoral.
So
Yeah. At a substantially lower cost than what we thought it would be. So.
So are you gonna provide a tag on all of our emails once we switch?
So we've been kind of setting that up to have kind of a notification that tells everyone, hey, this email is going to be changing,
Right.
and then we can decide when we want to do away with that.
Change it.
Exactly. Yeah.
May I?
Go ahead, Tim.
what mine currently has, because we're just trying to implement it, at the bottom, so you have like your signature, the standard, and then it says, note, this email will be changed to kimcheeto@floydcovid.gov.
Right,
So it's an already automatic disclaimer
gotcha.
that's coming in the future.
And I can also set up an automatic reply on it as well, as that way when someone sends you an email, they'll get a kickback saying,
Right.
the email will still come through, but it will come out and say that, this email's
Yeah.
changing. So
I think we decided we're gonna do it,
People,
doing it in increments. So however departmentally, I believe you said you're gonna do the electoral.
because there's a lot of things that are still linked to the .org domain, so we're gonna have to make sure to go through and update those things before we actually implement the whole thing. So
going away from Barracuda to something else.
it still will be having Barracuda as our security as well. So, but yeah, because they're still there to catch some things that come through, but so we still do want to keep that. But yeah, a lot of the initial threats are going to be blocked. So right,
That do come.
sure, yeah, we will still have the backing of Barracuda. Yeah, right, yeah,
So we're still
yeah, yeah,
like,
right.
Beep.
Yeah.
who's had the problem?
Yeah, right.
Well, Israel is gonna pick up if I send her the information, she'll send me $2.5 million.
That might have been legit. I'll let you know. Yeah, she's got a lot of money.
I used to get them all the time out of, where was it? It was in Africa somewhere. All over.
Yep.
I did get some I deleted that had nothing to do with county business. They're still in the delete.
Yeah.
If somebody wants them.
Yeah. Pursue it.
Then just real quick, a couple of other updates, one update and a couple questions. So, Kevin had mentioned us meeting and talking about our contract this morning, but he's asked if we could push that off till maybe our next regular meeting.
Night meeting.
Night meeting, and that'll give him some opportunity to share that there are enough concerns that we are moving closer. And so, just want to let you know about that. So we're not talking about that today. If you want to. And then just to double check, remind you all, of course, that you have the audit give to you last time. And so, start with you. We'll reach out to Scott and schedule him to come maybe to the next regular meeting, not a budget meeting, and see if that works for y'all. And then, if you have any questions you have for us in advance of that, either for us or to share with him to make sure to answer, feel free. We can do that.
So we're talking the 25th?
Yes.
Mhm.
Even said us to go over it with.
I asked for it ahead of time so that we could look at it. I hope we could have a meeting with y'all.
We can do
That
that.
doesn't work out. Where we discussed it. It would help me a lot better.
Mm-hmm. We can,
So maybe at another budget meeting?
well, or if there are things, I think I hit most of my highlighted concerns in that management discussion. So you all may or may not know, that actually is written by us, that particular management discussion. So I tried to put everything in there, but if there are other things, no, it's your meeting. Okay, we can do that. We can do that now. We can do that today. Bye.
Yeah, we could quit about 11:30 and you could
Okay. I'm not sure I even have enough to keep you busy till 11:30 unless you want We don't, because my list is, I've checked off just about everything on my list. So the other things,
We could one more thing along.
yeah,
Yeah,
we don't need you to unless you really want to.
She wants to hear.
You don't have to make a meeting to have a meeting. It's okay. No, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, the only things real quick, if I might just kind of notify you all real quick before we, there is, we do have two outstanding FOIA requests I wanted to make sure you're aware of. One is from the kind of Open the Books Virginia that's asking for employee names and salary. We've been discussing this with them since June.
Last year?
Yes, because they kept asking for it for free. And we kept saying no and calculated out how much it would cost. And then they would come back with a slightly shorter list of what we wanted. And we said, yes, that would be less, but here's your new number. And so finally, they've finally decided that just a name and a salary for 1 year would be sufficient. So,
They changed the laws from a certain dollar amount down, you can do.
That's
name,
correct.
But certain dollar amount up, you can do by position. You can do the position and salary, but you don't do the name and salary. That's still, so even though they're asking for a name, they're not gonna get a name on a lot of it, just get a position.
Or just salary, but not the names.
Yeah, salary is, but the name. Well, we'll be.
I like
there are
Joe.
Where they actually put their name.
yeah, yeah.
I lied.
Yeah.
My W-2 again this morning. I was like,
Make a motion to go into closed session or 2.2.
Well, she is almost.
So, well, the second FOIA is related to all correspondence and similar documents between the building official and a list of folks related to Floyd. So that's due at the end of the week. And so I just, if you see stuff start to come out, I want you all to be aware of that. There's that most of the things that have been requested have already been turned over in previous FOIA requests. But I also
the same people.
Persons.
same people requesting that it's a very specific and long list of communications with this individual, this organization. So it's a list of about 8, 10, something like maybe more than 10.
But many of them have already been received.
Yes, almost all of it, candidly, because it's just
So we don't have to redo it again.
We'll just say we'll provide what we did before. We'll copy the same stuff we did before, and any addition. Right now, there's been some.
Yeah, they've already got these.
Well,
It is, but there's also there will be some charges associated with this because they're also asking for plats, and so we have to run plats on the big printer. So that's a little
Hourly rate
bit.
of pay for Mark and Sydney. Paper cost.
since it's a new FOIA request, even though you've got the documentation you sent forward, you're still letting Steve review to make sure that, so he has to review this information, even though he's reviewed it one time before. He still has to re-review it to make sure that it, because each individual FOI has to be reviewed by
legal counsel. And does that get passed on too?
yes.
No.
Legal
Legal
counsel
counsel specifically is excluded. Now, my time, if when I review it, it is Kim's time, Mark's time, any of us, it is. But legal counsel is
It's
not.
not.
Mhm.
Really?
I think so.
Whoever wins in June, get that change.
Yeah. So, and then related to that real quick, and then, Mr. Chair, we could go to close if you'd like, but is an announcement that Miss Kim will be unavailable Friday and Monday. that she's actually going to take a little time off. So once we get this FOIA out the door, so I know the earth has moved. So if you would be so kind as to direct your phone calls elsewhere, I'll be around. Mark will be around. Kim will be around. That was all I got.
Yeah, 4 days.
Yeah. Progress. Progress. We're making progress. That's all I have.
The plane, yeah.
If I do that, I get a whooping. We are getting way back, but
2.2, 3711, A3, and
So moved.
second.
Okay, on the motion to move to closed session under 2.23711A1 related to personnel and A3 related to real property acquisition. Ms. Cookenbook,
Yes.
Mr. Booth,
Yes.
Ms. Bechtel,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
and Mr. Terman.
yes.
All right, we go to closed.
Alrighty, I'll take a motion to come out of closed session.
So
moved. Second.
on the motion to come out of closed session, Ms. Bechtel,
Yes.
Ms. Cookenbook,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
Mr. Booth,
Yes.
and Mr. Terman.
Yeah.
All right.
Take a motion to certify that we only discussed those things we're in the closed session for.
Second.
All right, on the motion to certify that we only talked about things we were supposed to talk about in closed session, namely under A1 and A3, Mr. Booth?
Yeah.
Ms. Cookenbook?
Yes.
Excuse me. Ms. Bechtel?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
And Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Don't start yawning.
Yeah, I should make more coffee. We're debating upgrading the coffee.
Upgrade to the coffee?
Upgrading
Is that what you
coffee.
said?
Yeah, we were, Myra was the one that very much liked the coffee that we had been getting. But since Myra is retired, we've been having some
You
discussions.
want some with a
about
little more kick, huh?
I vote to upgrade the coffee.
maybe support our local small business.
There you go.
That's 5 minutes break before she gets done.
If you want to upgrade your coffee, I upgrade it.
There you go, thank you.
I had a crazy thought while going on this morning. No. We took a 5-minute break, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still.
Okay. Can we hijack the rec park Floyd Fest weekend to do a vendor? Just have, invite all the vendors that would have been at Floyd Fest.
Okay.
So you, was there any more budget items that you?
That was, I think, all I had. Just the meeting calendar.
The schedule.
Yeah, the schedule. Sorry. The meeting schedule for budget purposes is kind of the last thing that I had. And well, and it's funny because the last meeting you asked why I left such a big gap between today and your next work session, and now we're kind of thinking maybe that's a good idea since we're waiting on the General Assembly. You can always kind of hold some time open, but if you don't come back to this work until the 25th, you still should have plenty of time, I would think, because you've kind of you kind of know what your options might be and have some thoughts already about what you might do. So,
Right.
Yeah, so given that and given the lack of additional information from the Commonwealth, there's not, I don't have much more to, we don't have much more to share.
Just so you know, I check every morning on the Commonwealth. It's one of the, like, my first tasks, just to see if I can, as soon as it's hot, like I can get it. Nothing, there's nothing. Correct.
Have you sit down and made a different fee, any recommendations on those?
We haven't yet, but we can have that for you for the 25th. Yeah, that's good.
Somewhere with them, we should have the information from the General Assembly, and then we could set a public hearing date.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're gonna start our meeting at 4 that day.
On the 25th?
On the 25th, that's what it says on our sheet here.
Yeah, and that's just kind of based on what you had done before, since you have a regular meeting starting at 6.
6. Joe, where are you?
The budget meeting.
Noted that. Since, and, would we try to break and maybe grab a bite to eat?
Or we
But
can,
we'll go till 9, probably that night.
Before you come in.
Easily.
or we can bring some,
We could bring something in.
Yeah.
yeah, we could bring something in too.
And Lynn, I had heard.
Okay.
Next, keep it open.
Next week's, like, or,
And then Jerry and I are going up on the 26th and 27th as board of
Mm-hmm.
directors for VACA.
Okay.
I have one thing that I wanted to make mention before we delve into the audit. So right now we have just under 100,000 for the real estate reassessment. And the last time we did it, it was 335,000, if my memory serves me well. One would probably have to think it's probably gonna be 350 this year. I mean, we're gonna have to do the RFP, which I know you guys know about. I just think we're gonna have to, when we're talking about stuff and budget stabilization and the extra monies, I think we're really gonna have to seriously consider funding that column a little bit more while we have some money to fund it with. I would not wanna get till next year and not be able to afford a reassessment.
well, now, with this reassessment, they're actually gonna start it, we're gonna put the RFP out and start it actually in this year.
Next year, right?
Well, I'm looking at, I'm looking at, well, first of all, normally what we've done in the past is we try and have it, we're setting effective rates in a non-election year, so
Right.
politics totally out of it.
Correct.
So for us to do that, we would have to start the process this year, then approve everything
In 24 to go into effect in 25.
or whatever.
Right, that's what you're saying, because
Yeah,
you
so-
and you are up in 25. 2 years after us.
And then any effective rate, that takes politics totally out of the
Right.
picture.
Right.
And we had it on that schedule at one time where basically it was every 4 years and can go up to 6. but
Right.
Going up to 6 years usually stressed the county out so far that the day
hard.
was not,
Accurate.
it made such a big impact all at one time. The closer you do it, the less.
I have it right here, Linda.
So that RFP would have to go on out. and
Like now,
Then,
they start it and then and it just seems like it, I mean, you just drove down my driveway, it seems like yesterday, but
well, I know.
obviously it wasn't.
So, if I might, so Lisa sent Kim and I kind of a schedule based on previous experience.
And it's in your packets under the Commissioner of Revenue. And it will say guideline 2023 reassessment revised. So you have what and what Linda's gonna read, it is in your packet. Under the Commissioner of Revenue.
Right.
Great minds.
The department request,
Yeah,
So we're a little bit behind to start with the RFP, but we can catch
Still
that up.
doing it.
Yeah, there's no reason that can't be caught up.
Hit it home.
she may have started. Oh, we do it, okay.
But I do have the old ones.
That's right, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, she sent it to us.
Yeah.
That's correct. Right?
Yeah, that one, the top one.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner of the Revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it's that one, guideline.
Bam, which we're.
Yes, we need to be looking. See, that would be broke up, it'd probably be 350,000 or better, but that's gonna be broke over the 2-year cycle, over 2 year budget.
Understood, but what I'm getting at is since we have not had as much as I would have liked to have seen put away, and just because I mean, I knew we had the 19, but since we have a bucket that has some cash in it, I would like to, and we're not, the excess from PPT, I think we need to look at that
You
seriously.
need to increase that instead of doing an additional appropriation later.
Yeah, I really do. I think we have an opportunity to catch it now. I think we should take that. I mean, this is my own personal opinion. I think we should take it and then work with it.
You know, if I might, the other piece of funds that we don't have on here is your ARPA funds. So since this is a one-time, once every 5 years item, that might be another place to consider
Well-
funding it. Since it's not a truly reoccurring expense
Well, that doesn't reoccur. We do it all the time, every 5 years.
every 5 years, but it's opposed to like using, we've kind of advised, and of course you guys haven't wanted to do that anyway, but advised against like payroll and those kind of things. But in this case, if you wanted to take some money out of your ARPA funds and apply it towards that, that would certainly be an allowable expense.
Well, I think we have some other things that needs to be done with ARPA, like, maybe renovations, and maybe paying for it.
You're still sitting at about $1.6 million in ARPA.
Right on.
It does, and that's how it was the last time, because it was on a 5-year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, from our perspective, I think things have held steady. Wouldn't you agree, Levi?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing has gone ridiculous. There's been a few things, but nothing major has been ridiculous in the in our world that we've seen. Things have actually kind of sort of trended a little bit down. So
Like vehicle values.
yeah, kind of like the vehicle values.
How much do these assessments cost you?
350, I think we should budget. It
Well,
was 335 last time.
that's where it's at.
About how many more residents will need to be assessed this go around than last, a new construction? Not significant.
New construction is not what we're seeing. Well, I mean, the builders are really busy.
That's what I'm saying, if there's 100 houses, what percentage increase in buildings, properties to be reassessed?
But that would be a 6-year, then you put it on 6. All right.
If you haven't had that many more construction.
I mean, I don't think it's anything significant, It's like we get
We
team
did.
division.
Right, I
Right.
was just thinking for the cost.
I hear you.
Yeah.
If we had a real big building, then it'd be different.
I know a lot, I think a lot of people would be happy if we delayed the assessment.
With everything else going on.
Yeah.
Because
I guess so.
I had a couple of people bring that up to me.
Have you already?
Said, y'all gonna reassess next year, what you gonna do to us? I said, I don't know.
It says we can go on a 6-year cycle.
Yeah, we can go on a 6.
Yeah.
Used to do that.
I mean, we can do that, but I still say,
Put money aside.
put the money, if we've got the money now,
Mm-hmm.
in that PPT bucket used, I just think that that's a good idea. And I would love to fully fund it, or at least come really close to fully funding it.
Needs over time ago. Needed.
You know, I'm a big saver. And I
How
like
much do we have in
Y'all
the end?
start to a certain extent.
19 times what, 4? Is that it? 19 times 4, right? So just at 80, right?
76.
6.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be.
So we would also buy more time to do RFPs and do interviews, and we could make some really good decisions about who's doing it.
We wouldn't be such a rush for somebody.
Right.
Time.
Exactly.
I think that's what we should do. We have, if we are changing that, do we need to do that by motion?
I don't know. In terms of the 5 years to 6, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to double check with Steve since it's such a big issue, what we need to do.
We can address it.
I didn't mean to bring up a,
Uh-huh.
it weighs heavy on me when I get to this time, because it's such a large amount of funds, in my opinion.
I have discussed with some of y'all, the one, just as a side note, maybe a trivia point, is that when you do the reassessment year is the 1 year you can look at your requirements for land use. So I have asked Mr. Durbin to help me look at just what other folks have in terms of what their ordinance says.
As far as,
In order to, with the qualifications to be enrolled in the land use program. I'm not sure the dollar, I think there's some things that are slightly. So that's why I was asking Mr. Durbin to help me, particularly since he also works with some of our surrounding counties.
Yeah.
He's pretty familiar with that. More so than me.
Change.
How much we got? I can't remember what the line item,
Or, what am I?
the money that we put away for the reassessment.
I think it was only, if it's the line item that I'm thinking, and you can tell me differently, right here.
Yeah, where you like, but
we
we don't have a running total.
only carry over what the cost of the assessor would be, not the cost of, this is how it's been since it was 19.
Yeah, so it's 30 and 38, so it's 68. What? That's not cumulative?
No,
So what's in there? 19?
You know.
but it has been. Prior to twenty
Well, we
21,
approved 15,000 in that bucket in
and then
21.
you carried over, and then you carried over 15,000.
Instead of adding
It's
to.
not
We
in
haven't
addition
added.
to. This pays for what I understood it to be, is the assessor.
No,
No, the person the company we hire.
Well,
Yeah.
I say we need to fill that bucket quickly.
indeed. Because I thought in 2021, we decided that we would be putting money away for it.
this is what,
I mean, even before that, no, since the last one, in 18.
I mean, look, I believe I have that.
Oh, yeah, the field assessor professional services at the top of that page. Yeah, and then the assessor is the same amount.
Oh, the assessor is what goes out every year. That's the,
Right.
the
Correct.
Yeah.
3,100. It's up there in the field assessor, the
Right.
top line.
But the professional services bucket
Separate.
is not being filled.
But that's okay. The field assessor is the professional services. The which one, see, this is one of those things. So which one is,
Hold on.
The one by itself is like assessment.
okay, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, because we have an assessor go out all the time when we have a new house or a new construction. Right,
The field assessor in line item 3120 up there,
yeah, at the top.
it's the volume of new construction permit valuing new parcels due to splits each year.
Right.
One by itself.
3,100.
One by itself is overall, you could say.
It's very expensive.
Correct.
Very expensive.
Cumulatively, have all that money in.
No,
We don't.
I mean, I thought since 18 we were supposed to be putting away money.
I thought we were supposed to do that. But I don't know where it would be, so.
Yeah, maybe you guys need to.
We'll do a little.
I don't know.
background.
Maybe it could be under. I
We don't
will-
have to spend time on it now.
Yeah, I will look to see maybe if it's a line item I don't have or haven't had on the budget
Yeah.
that was inherited, it could be.
Yeah. I might go home and look at my old ones and maybe give you a hint.
Well, we want to maybe earmark in the fund balance,
Maybe.
that's a possibility, and somewhere in the exchange that earmark go.
Anyway, since we have this bucket with some money,
Well, part of that is the fund balance too.
was what? No fund balance. It's kind of low, isn't it?
May I? I pulled up,
You don't check on that? We'll get back to it later.
Yeah.
Well, I pulled up, if I may, is that okay? In in fiscal year 2019, all right, in 2018, it was 15,000. In 2019, it was 175,000 approved.
Yeah.
In 2020, 182,000. 2021, 15,000. 2020, yes, 2021 was 15,000, and then it went 2022, and then you could see there. So the only 2 years that I show from what was left is 2019 and 2020, 175,000, 182,000 respectively. But then it drops right to 15
175.
and 182.
So that's 357. So it's a matter of where's that money? In fund balance?
Yes, that would fall back. I would have to see if it was carried over to do anything else, but I would assume, again, I'm just looking at a template of what,
Right,
was
that-
in history. If it wasn't carried over for anything, it went back to fund balance.
Balance.
And
think it
it's
is.
really not because we haven't,
Right.
because we haven't
Yeah.
recognized it and brought it.
Good. Gotcha.
Correct.
So
It was like, wait, that's it.
I was looking at you going, how do I
Well,
take this?
what we have, I guess you'll get back to us, what we have in fund balance?
Sure.
Okay. Then in that case, we did do what we were supposed to do, and we have the money
Maybe.
at 357, depending on what.
Used to.
It would be part of the undesignated.
Correct.
That's
If-
what I was thinking, or considered part of the designated, one way or the other, but.
We need to tighten that up next time. I think that's an important thing to do. Because I know we do this so we don't find ourselves,
Yeah, doing.
well, we gotta put, yeah, right, at the last second, you know.
So worst case scenario for this budget, you would look to split it up to fall into each fiscal budget year. Is that?
Or we back all these numbers on this lease system and stuff, then it, like we started March of 24 instead of 23, that's gonna be in this budget cycle, so
Correct.
we need to make some allowance for that.
Under the assessor's comment.
So you need to pull out of the fund balance and put it in there. Because it's gonna be an expense.
So many levels to delay this
Yeah.
reassessment.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll get up
Right.
with Steve.
If we have
before
the
next
ability
meeting.
to.
Yeah.
If it was unused in this bill, it could be carried forward into the next and then added to cover the cost.
And you're looking for a cost approximately 350,000, correct?
I'm ballparking.
Yeah.
It was
Based on what it
335.
was last.
Yeah, it was 335 last time. If my memory serves me well, you should have a bill from, what is their name again?
Wingate.
Wingate and Associates.
Probably add 1% to that number. at least.
That's why I'm going up to 350.
Well, and we'll follow up with the commissioner, and because I'm sure some other folks that are of similar size have done a reval in the last couple of years and see what the cost was.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, but other places aren't quite like Floyd.
Related to revaluation?
Mhm.
Okay, apparently I learned.
The property values here don't,
Are different.
yeah. They don't fall in line with our neighboring,
Yeah.
Some of them, but
Generally
not all.
higher.
yeah.
We're higher, right?
Yes,
Generally
for higher.
About 20% for most open land.
Well, and a lot of that goes back to what land is selling for. So Mr. Wingate, he expressed that many times. That's the first thing they look at, because they'll look at a section of the county and they look to see what land is selling for, and that affects the.
All right.
That's fun. So, you know.
Well,
But, yeah,
It's a different conversation to have.
all right. Well, we can, I don't know if you all had questions, or we can just kind of start walking through some things, and if there's things that we don't highlight and you want us to learn more about during the budget meeting,
yeah.
we didn't know. You're in the front, so I'll walk through that first.
Okay, and then I'll be in.
Okay, if we were having a little internal discussion here amongst the staff, and so if it's all right with you all, we'll just continue this discussion as a part of your budget workshop. And as a part of that, it's important to look at your financial statement. How's that? Okay. Okay. So, yes, to Mr. Booth, most of course, I recognize that it is a written document, so not all the things we've shared with you would necessarily be written, but most of the concerns and highlights that Kim and I have mentioned to some of you all in passing start on page 6 under the management discussion and analysis. And feel a little bit better ownership about this than last year. Last year we were candidly trying to just kind of follow behind what previous folks had done as best we could. And then when those folks came back and helped us try to do it and they couldn't figure out how everything had gone together, we decided that was a good time to reevaluate. And so I went out and looked at what some other counties included in this section, and generally it was a little less technical, a little bit more overview, a little bit more, this is also context in terms of what the economy looks like, some of those kind of things. So that's what you see before you. And so if you want, Mr. Chairman, I'll just kind of start walking through some of these, and if Kim has things that she wants to add, we certainly would want to hear that. And then while you are talking, I went through and tagged a couple of other things I might want to highlight for you all. Of course, the most important thing is always total assets and deferred outflows versus our assets versus our liabilities, which leaves you at your net position. So our net position as of June 30 was $14,842,248. Of that amount, slightly less than half is unrestricted. So the rest of that is in restricted funds. And so that's, when Kyle was here talking about you shouldn't be concerned, but it's time to be paying attention. And I think that's pretty much where that would come from. Governmental activities, net position is the same, and that is an increase over the previous year. So I've seen a little bit of growth there. And then you'll see the same statement, the third item that Kyle had made before, that our operating revenue and expenditures have grown at about the same rate over the course of about the last 5-10 years. I would note, though, that some of that operating revenue is also bond-related operating revenue. So it's not necessarily that your tax has always been, and tax and permits has been the same amount. There's been a certain amount of growth there, but also a certain amount of growth that comes from borrowing. The county's unassigned fund balance was $5.4 million, and that's about 11% of revenues, which is lower than it was previously. Of course, that was pointed out by Kyle. I will tell you, this is one of the places the auditor and I had some discussion because he continues to show us with a negative balance of $1.6 million in the fire and rescue fund. And if you add that back in, then things look a little rosier. So then and he continued, even though he had emailed us about maybe we should take it out when I sent him, again, like our discussion, you all may very well have a moral obligation, but we don't feel you have a legal obligation, then to me, it should be different, but I choose to
Is
take it
that the
out.
reason the numbers are different in number one and that one? Up here, he said unrestricted net position is 6.3, and
Mhm.
down here it's 5.4. So is that part of what's the reason those numbers don't match up?
Well, that's part of it, and your net position is slightly different than your unassigned fund balance too. There's a little bit,
But that's a big.
yeah,
chunk.
that is a big chunk of it. You're right. Yeah.
And-
Yes, sir.
Never did understand why he considered that a negative.
Me neither.
And ARPA.
And ARPA, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, so that's discussed a little bit later, but yeah. So I think in terms of the fire and rescue fund, he's assuming 2 cents to be put in there every year specifically just for fire and rescue. And you all haven't necessarily done that, although I would argue there have been plenty of expenditures that maybe should have been classified against that. The radio system being a perfect example.
And the two fire. The ambulance.
Operational expenses are salaries.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, he's looking at it from the, I think what he's doing, he's looking at it from the standpoint of it's all volunteer, and he may be disallowing stuff like the salary.
But he's never adjusted it.
Yes.
But that would be operation expenses.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So he hasn't been, in my opinion, for whatever reason, it hasn't been credited in the manner that it maybe should be. If you have that obligation, then I would say in many years you probably met the obligation. It just wasn't necessarily categorized in the right bucket. Because yeah, there's been plenty of expenditures. I mean, since I've been here, you bought an ambulance and a fire truck, and now a radio system, plus all the personnel related
Well, I
expenses.
think that goes back, that's another one of the reasons that they didn't have to.
Mhm.
It definitely qualifies under that fund.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. And just as a side note to Mr. Booth's comment, we've scheduled, Kevin and I have scheduled, and Kim can join us, have scheduled some time to talk to Mr. Durbin a little bit more about what that structure looks like. Is it what it needs to look like now that things are changing a little bit? So it's kind of on the B list, not the A list, but the B list. Of course, you'll see the revenues from your general property taxes exceeded your budget amount. And that is because the tradition here has been, and we have continued to be pretty conservative on your revenue streams. So keeping things very close to the previous year, because it's always better to have a little bit more sitting on the table than having a little bit less than you need. So we've continued that. In some of my previous roles, I've done forecasting differently to try to get a little bit closer to what like an economic forecast would be, but this seems to work well for you all, so I have not. Revenues from other local sources were generally above budget. Our local sales tax was over budget by about 1.5%, so a little bit of growth, but again, compared to our surrounding jurisdictions, not terrific, but not negative, so that's good. Utility taxes, motor vehicle license underperformed across the board, and court fines and forfeitures were significantly less than expected. And I think part of that was there was a thought that the courts were going to come back a little bit stronger and quicker than they did. Also, revenues and charges for law enforcement and traffic control. So when the sheriff's office works events or does stuff at Virginia Tech or at the schools, that has been consistently off. And so that's something going forward. We'll probably work a little bit closer with them to see if we can get better estimates on that because it's historically been based on previous years, not necessarily what the sheriff has planned for the next year. So we're gonna make a change there. I think I noted to you the other day, your tax collection rate is really quite good. So 96% for a county of this size is pretty good work. And that has a lot to do with the office and then also with the culture here. Positive. Let's see. Seven revenue that fell below expenditures. And a lot of that though had to do with these grant items. And so that's what I've talked to some of you all about individually. For instance, the county budgeted 1.535 in COVID state and local recovery funds during FY22 based on receipt of that amount. But we only incurred eligible expenditures of 1.1, and how he has chosen to show that in this document is different than I would have assumed and is different than occurs with the other auditing house, because I did have an extensive conversation with Craig Meadows about what does Montgomery do, and so theirs is much more as I would expect. We have this amount of money, you recognize all of it as revenue, but Scott does it differently. And you can ask him to explain it because I can't. The next item in there has to do with the economic development grants, and I'll say that is the most volatile part of your audit all the time, is because those grants may or may not come to fruition, maybe on a different timeline. It's kind of all over the map a little bit, so you'll notice that at this point in your budget process, we didn't include any of that. When we get to having to do your final budget, we'll add it in, but hopefully at that point we'll have more information. But that's where we're going there. Revenues for Children's Service Act, so stuff downstairs, fell under budget as caseloads were lower than expected, and there were several things related to social service stuff. And I don't know if you want to, I don't know how common it is, but as Mr. Booth points out, the fact that their fiscal year falls different than ours, I think tends to make it
Too much
really difficult
Too much short, yeah.
to figure out the way it's been done, what's available there. So that's something over time we'll probably want to revisit.
I spoke to Dakota as well. I'm sorry. I spoke to Dakota, and I had asked if they've ever given additional information for those, or even a projection or anything. And from what I understand, he has never asked, he has never questioned the difference. So that's all I really, it's always been done that way. Those were her words.
Spending is still in our current year budget,
That's right.
but for them, it's their next year's budget already. So that throws the numbers every which way.
But you should be able to account for that budgetarily
Yeah.
and put a separate line or a separate column to account, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll note that in FY21, so that was actually, I think, right before Kim and just as I was coming in, there was a decision made to start listing in the budget the full project grant revenues at the beginning of the project, and then carrying over to the next year all remaining funds. So for those of you who have been looking at these over the years, you'll probably notice that there's a change there, and I don't know if that was highlighted to you also. I want to make sure it was noted in here. Of course, the PSA note receivable is at $307,367. That's scheduled to be paid back with 1% interest at about $20,000 per year. And of course, the last year you allowed that to move to the end of the payment schedule, and this year was included in our recommended budget. Although, things may have changed different there. Some of you will know, I guess, a little bit later what their thoughts are. I know there's been a lot of discussion in the public meeting about what is the cause of the level of indebtedness. So that's why I included the last bullet on this, that as of June 30, we had a little over $7 million in remaining outstanding construction and capital commitments. Of that, 72, almost 73% was related to the school projects, while 27% was tied to the growth center and playground equipment. So when folks ask you about why do you have this level of indebtedness, you have more information hopefully about where. Questions about any of that? The next sections are kind of boilerplate with stuff we must put in there. So I guess really there's nothing that's new news until you get to the bottom of page 9 where we just talk about government-wide financial analysis and the inflows and outflows. So the net position, 54, almost 55% is investment in capital assets. And the next largest portion of the county's net position is unrestricted. Good things in here. Move to page 11. Again, this is kind of boilerplate that you've seen before, but did want to bring a little bit of this to your attention. Our charge for services has gone up a little bit, but it didn't go up quite as much as we had hoped. And most of that is related to some things at the transfer station. So to your questions about looking at permits and fees there, I think that's some of what we would want to do. And then, of course, general property taxes and other taxes, you'll see what's going on there. See at the bottom, there was revenues from governmental activities totaled $27 million, an increase of about $250,000. Primary reasons for the increase was the ARPA funds. And again, that was kind of my little jab there of a 1.6 million in ARPA funds that we would have had by June 30th. Only 1.1 million is recognized as revenue in the audit. And then, of course, you would increase the tax rate that time. And you see on page 12, expenses for local government activities increased about $407,000. And that included investment in the Commerce Center. And that, as I was saying, those things just really throw your EDA budget line off. There was an increase in public works costs associated with the transfer station and the landfill. That is continuing to get more and more expensive. And an increase of $248,000 associated with the schools. I would note we did have a bump related to IT, which you might recall, those of you who were here, that there was a period of time that we were paying both Tech Squared and a staff person. And so that was, we had talked about making it shorter, and you all had decided it was better to spend more money and be safer. So that was the decision. The pie chart that's in here is one that you generally have in here. I will tell you one of the things that hopefully you'll see next year is, I think we've mentioned to you, your budget is presented and has been presented is not generally in these categories. These are the general categories that are supposed to be the local government chart of accounts in Virginia. So what happens is when the auditor comes in, he takes our budget and then he does a crosswalk to put things in different categories. So we are moving to do that up front, and that'll be part of our munis conversion.
Yep.
Might have a little bumps every once in a while, but that's really, I felt like it was important for you all to be able to see those so you could do better comparisons with other jurisdictions and over time. You'll see it towards the bottom of page 13 where it talks about revenues fell short of budgeted expectations by quite a bit. But that mostly has to do with the timing of the categorical aid. but the way it shows up in the budget, in the audit, makes them look negative. And of course, some of that was offset by that additional property tax. Of course, the increase in expenditures had to do primarily with commerce. Go all the way over to page 16, which is near the end there. You'll recognize that those are drawn directly out of the Davenport presentation. So, but this comes up a lot about how much is falling off and how much is being picked up. So wanted to make sure that you were able to see that over time. And then, of course, you'll see in the nice little graph at the bottom that really, well, we'll have some fall off. The big fall off will be more 2035 and 2036. I have raised the question about that amount of money that's shown as, say, a payment, a bond obligation under the schools. And so Kyle was going to go back and try to find that because they weren't seeing that exact amount at first glance. And that's pretty much it. We did just go ahead and note that, of course, during the audit period, the unemployment rate here was 2.5%, which was 0.5% lower than the state as a whole, and is a reduction from the previous year. Is there anything else you want to know?
That was good. Thank you.
The rest of it's pretty boring, candidly, unless you're really into this. But there were a couple of things that, as I was glancing through here again, I thought you might find of interest. So if you go to page 40, that has to do with, it says credit risk of debt securities. And I will note in this whole section, there are numerous times the auditor talks about we don't have an investment policy. So it's kind of the same thing we're hearing from Davenport as well, that that's something we should probably put on the agenda. But I thought it was interesting to see, what are, even though we really aren't rated, this is where we would pull out, which we still look pretty good given the challenges that we have as a very small county. And so that's credit to y'all of being good stewards, because there aren't that many jurisdictions of this size that look quite like this. So I think that's really good for you all to know.
While we do what we do.
That's okay. Page 42, I also thought was interesting. The primary government indebtedness, or kind of mid page, it says note 5, long-term obligations. And so it just lets you look at the different types of obligations there and how it's divided out. So general obligation bonds as opposed to lease revenue bonds and even lease liabilities. One of the changes that you'll see this year from some of the previous years is they added in a lot of leases as a GASB requirement that had not been there before. So that's part why they spent a little bit more time here than they usually do. So all the leases for all of those vehicles, but also the leases for the copiers and all that kind of stuff all play into this. So speaking of copiers, on page 46 is lease liabilities related to the schools. And so you'll see their lease liabilities are mostly related to copiers and the touchless water system, which I just thought was kind of interesting. And then, of course, they have some other obligations there. But the copiers actually do get to be pretty pricey.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that Jenny is actually working on yesterday and today is trying to pull together the schedule of all the different copier and printer leases that we have. Historically, every department has gone out on their own, or been pitched separately. It turns out that some of them are using the state contract, which is generally pretty good. And like Rhonda uses that and some other
Yeah.
things. We're not under the governmental contract rate and for our Xerox stuff. And when they questioned about that, the answer was, well, that rate wasn't available when you signed the lease however many years ago. So we're kind of looking at being able to rebid the whole thing. And maybe do it as a best value instead of a lowest bid because of some of the challenges there. But you know, different people like different types of copiers, so we want to be sensitive to that too. But it's one of the things I will say Chris brought up before he left, and Danny and I have talked about. It really is really challenging for folks in that role to have to
With
know so many different machines, and particularly that they're not in the conversations up front about what is this supposed to do and how is it supposed to work. So they got to figure it out afterwards when it's broken, and everybody's standing there looking at you.
So, if I may, when you bring up what other jurisdictions do, I mean, do other jurisdictions actually buy all the copiers for everybody in their counties? Schools? Everything?
The answer on the level of financial control of county administration versus other entities varies tremendously. And so in some cases, every constitutional office, every enterprise operation can go out on their own. And others, they try to do central purchasing, encourage them to do central purchasing. So it just kind of depends a lot what the history has been and the relationship has been. I will tell you that Pulaski has put together something that we were going to maybe bring up as soon as you passed your budget. They actually have an MOU with their constitutional officers about what everybody's role is going to be, and then if they sign off on that, then there's some benefit to the constitutional officers to do that, but they get to choose. So and they found that, Jonathan told me, they found that to be really effective, and it has to do with signing off on their personnel policies, on their purchasing policies, all those things. So for instance, you know, the constitutional officers either don't use our personnel manual, some use parts of it, and then we have one of the offices that pretty much uses it. So it just depends. So that's one of those things. Now, I was telling you, them not using it in some cases saves the county some money. So that's a long answer to your question. So our hope, though, is as we install Munis, that part's going to be more towards the end because we thought it was important to get the budget part in first. But that we will have the requisition system that we currently don't have. So that would then the constitutional officers would send something in, and then you know Jenny or someone in that kind of role would say, yes, you have this available, and it'll be charged to this, and then that generates a purchase order. And I think that'll also help them be able to keep up a little better too, because they now, like you, have to wait for their bright stuff to print out. And then, you know, if they haven't kept, you know, close records on things, there might be surprises. So that'll help them.
And isn't it the accepted practice that when we buy more in bulk, we get a better rate?
Generally.
Generally.
Yeah, and we've also been looking at office supply kind of things. Some of those things. Yeah. Let's see. Anything else? The EDA. Why did I tag this? I think just so you could see on page 94, it's the component unit is the EDA and their assets. And again, just to kind of mention the level of volatility there. So that has everything to do with, you know, buying buildings, building roads, those kind of things.
Volatility, huh?
Yeah, volatility. Yeah, I would also, sorry.
On page 46, the EA has a line of credit.
Uh-huh.
for $100,000 with a zero balance, but the interest rate of prime plus 0.25.
Yes,
Is this something that they need to keep open? 4
They-
years?
they really don't
Because
use
it's
it.
a live,
close.
it's a,
Right.
basically a liability.
Liability.
And how, so is it something that we have the ability to close out or just make a
Close.
suggestion?
Done in February.
Okay, so it's taken care of. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Very
such
good.
a great idea. It's already taken.
Wonderful.
It wasn't used, it was there for, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's now, it was up for, and then it was decided.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Open credit cards are disheartening.
On the bottom of page 94, the risk management, I just wanted to draw your attention to some good news, which is settled claims. So this has to do with our insurance. Settled claims resulting from these various risks have not exceeded our coverage in any of the past 3 fiscal years.
Very
So that's been really good. We for the most part, our claims have been with VACO have been deputies' cars and injured employees. And the vast, and then the building back here, which they're going to start working on again tomorrow. I think they started working on it yesterday, actually.
They're still seeking retribution from the other insurance.
Yes. Note 17 on 96. I don't have many more tagged, so I just note that this landfill closure cost and all of that is really a looming issue. Now we have to turn in something. Scott fills it out for us, and then I submit it to DEQ that says we actually aren't creating a sinking fund for this, but if we had to, we have funds available, and we're allowed to do that. But so there isn't if the landfill suddenly has a huge rupture or something, we don't have a bucket that says, "Oh, this is what we're going to do." Under litigation, this was a subject of discussion, but Steve prevailed. So as of June 30, 2022, there were no matters of litigation involving the county, which would materially affect the county's financial position. I will tell you the reason there was a back and forth on this a little bit. You might recall back in the fall, we had an issue about a photo that had been used years ago. And so there was some discussion about if that should be included, but Steve continued to hold steady, and everything he sent in that said, as of June 30th, there wasn't anything.
Right.
So appreciate him doing that.
Maybe different next year, but for the,
Right.
Yes, and it's cleared out now. So that is gone. And that was kind of what he was thinking. He knew that that would be resolved one way or another before the next round. I was a little surprised. You all might know something about this, but the school board had a disputed claim with the third party administrator. So just wanted to notate that.
why was that included in ours?
So our audit includes all of our component units. So it's us, the schools, the EDA, Fire Rescue Fund, and Social Services. It's all one audit. But that's a good question. The next thing I noted is just the handling of the pandemic funds on 99 at the bottom.
Hold on, I think.
I just skipped ahead, but there's more things.
Back on that one, has that been settled?
I don't know. When I read this the other day, I was kind of surprised. So we can put a note to ask about that and get an answer back to y'all.
They're watching, so I think it had to do with their, as it states here, their medical insurance and, yeah. Yeah, it seems,
It apparently it wasn't by the time this was.
yeah.
Okay. bottom of page 99 is just kind of looking at how much was received related to ARPA funding, and then the ESSER funds, CARES Act, all of those. So, so you all are aware how much funding was really available, which was, while not as much as other folks, was a nice little shot. And for whatever reason, I didn't put a sticky on it, but there is a note somewhere in here to the question that was asked earlier about the FDIC and the insurance on the investment. So there's a notation in here. I'll try to figure out where my sticky went, but there is a notation that goes through what Steve was talking about the Virginia requirements, and so it's assumed in there, but we're still going to go ahead and ask the treasurer to double check that. I have no reason to think it's not true, but it just feels like we should check. Just the things that I thought were kind of interesting, and of course you can always is on 125 is where it's kind of the budgets versus actual versus and where we ended up. And that was also a lot of back and forth because we didn't necessarily see all these as the same. So if you have particular comment, things you want us to check in. Starting at
25.
thank you, 125. Sure. 102. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll verify it.
Yeah.
If I can look at that.
Yeah.
Cash the check before the day's out.
Right? Right?
You know, you didn't get the payroll tax. I just
Yes.
don't understand that final number. Ending
That's what I'm
fund
saying.
balance.
Take that back real quick.
Doesn't make sense.
Okay, we'll put I'll put a star on that one
I
too.
already have fund
Yeah.
balance.
Okay. Right.
Guess my question, getting into it too deep, is part of their review, did they review the statement that we got, or the reports that we got on what our fund balance was?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
You hear what I'm saying?
Yep.
Without me saying it.
Yep.
And if they did they go back and then make adjustments or not?
Right.
If they didn't, then that number is not.
Correct. Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
Nope.
I just wanted to, when I see something like that, I have to get it out.
And can I go back before we start anymore? On 99 with the ARPA and CARES and everything else? So the 470,403 is what's left of the CARES fund, the initial monies we got. Is that correct? And then the ARPA funds aren't listed here. Is that correct?
So the ARPA ones are included in the the first half of the ARPA funds are included. Right, but then the question how he shows them is different. So he's showing only the portion of the ARPA funds, as I understand it, only the portion of the ARPA funds that has been committed. So even though at that time the county had 1.6 million in ARPA funds, you all had only committed 1.1 million, which, as you know, was primarily funding to the PSA and then a significant number of hazard pay payments. And then I guess the playground was later. And that was where plenty, EMS, plenty, some of those things. So, but if it wasn't encumbered for something, then he didn't show it as a revenue.
money, so that money
It
was
would be
in
the
the,
deficit.
money was in the bank, it had been assigned a budget bucket,
Mhm.
and it wasn't in our balance.
Correct.
It actually
Okay.
shows up as a liability. He put it as a liability, which I contacted some outside CPA. I contacted a friend of mine who has her master's in public administration and a new CPA. I sent it to her, and her opinion was similar to Kim and I's, which is that shouldn't be a liability.
No.
If anything, it should be a contingent liability, which would be like a starred footnote, not actually listed as a liability.
Right.
Taking out of the current budget.
Right.
So I think when I was quizzing Scott about it, he said, well, but if you don't spend it, you have to give it back. So then it's a liability.
Understood, but we don't have to give it back until 26, and
The end of 24.
24.
it's in 24. Excuse
But yes, not during the current audited period.
me. Yeah.
Yes.
We didn't spend it and we did have to send it back, then that would show up in that audited for that, but not this one.
It'd be a revenue and a liability, so it would be a net zero.
Yes, wash.
It can be
Place
in that way.
Yes.
Not just.
But in that 24 year, not in this one.
Correct. The remainder, if you're carrying that over from a budget, then the year that it would become or the year that it could possibly become a liability, it could be shown that way
As
if it wasn't spent during the time of audit.
okay.
Back,
That is accurate.
That's our opinion.
Yes.
Opinion, and that is,
Now we've gone full circle.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I
Yeah, so we're back to that, and like I said, I also have talked to counterparts in Montgomery, since they have lots of
Yeah,
auditors that work for them. There are lots of accountants that work for them, and I went back and looked at theirs. I even sent a screenshot of what Montgomery County had in their most recent audit. Sent it to Scott and said, "Why is ours not like this?"
So the $470,403 of unspent funds, that was out of what?
I think that was
That was the ARPA. That was the remaining ARPA.
not CARES.
The remaining ARPA from the first
First
tranche,
tranche.
because remember, we're going back
Right.
June 30.
Okay.
And then we got the second tranche
So
after.
we still
June
haven't
30.
spent that.
So you have spent all but $100,000.
Right, it's 100,000, right.
The first one.
Right.
First
Right.
Right. The
what I
second
thought.
one still remains and sitting in a revenue line. I did not bring it over to an
Right.
expenditure line because if you guys didn't appropriate it, right. So it's still sitting even for auditing purposes, which was, thought to be the
Proper way, and a lot.
it's been sitting, and then whatever you guys wanted during this budget cycle to appropriate or bring over, then I will do that at that time.
Yeah.
wait, we don't expend any of that before 30th of this year.
The liability, right.
Yeah.
Liable spending.
Haha.
No, we're not liable to spend, it. We're definitely gonna spend it. Over, but don't understand his,
Yeah, and then
well, that impacts the numbers all the way through,
That's correct.
That was their point.
yeah.
Yeah.
so between that and this fire and rescue discussion,
It's almost, $3-4 million?
It makes it appears on paper, on his paper, that we're in a much worse financial situation than we are.
The way this audit is presented, yes.
which is again back to why when Kyle came that you should be paying attention, but you shouldn't panic, right? I think they know they're pretty good at telling us when it's time to panic, sweat, time to sweat. But they did not say that. There are. Let's see. On page 125 starts the schedule that shows you the actual schedule of revenues. And so that was something I pulled from this to give you that little couple of sentences at the beginning. But if you wanted to see more of the detail of that, for instance, at the bottom, charge for services for law enforcement and traffic control, they still did, right well. It's just they ended up off about 19,000, but that's the smallest they've been off in a couple of years. So I think it's getting closer. And we also raised some questions about I forget where they're in here, but the EMS revenues. We see as a little differently. So when he comes, at that point we had just said we'll just put a tag on this and talk about it later.
Regarding EMS revenue, is our new billing system helping with revenue?
It's gearing up. It's exactly, I think it's pretty much, and Linda agrees, it's pretty much the plan. There was a little bit of that transition period where we knew there would be a lull. And now that we've fine tuned everything, they understand the county's intentions. There was, a couple letters and we were like, whoa, we revisited, we had another meeting. I think we will start seeing
Change in the revenue?
the change in the revenue on a positive. Because they're also revisiting, a lot of low hanging fruit, which within the allotted time that Myra just, she was
There's
just
only so
keeping
much
current.
you could do.
So all those things they are able to, so I think it's gonna yield very positive.
Good news.
Yes, you're welcome.
And then you'll note on 126 what we were talking about, because I have to admit, first time I looked at the page 126, I about fell over. I think they were home. But there's a lot of these categorical aid things that are showing as off. And I went back and looked at our old ones, and they've always kind of looked off. And so, like the CSA payment, it shows between that and welfare payments off by more than $500,000. But again, that mostly seems to come back to timing because they're definitely not bouncing checks or anything. So it's not that. So that's something as we go forward with Munis, hopefully we can start figuring out how to reflect that a little better. And then if my favorite fun section for me is always starting at 135, which is kind of looking at different things over time. So you'll see there it goes through expenditures, collections, collection rates, all those kind of things. But to me, kind of show the best picture of how things are going overall. Because 1 year to me is if we were able to do best practice, some of these things we would be doing with a 3-year forecast, or in some cases a 5-year forecast. But we just haven't been able to do that. So at least this lets us kind of know in retrospect how we've been going.
That second line down.
Mhm.
Depending on what happens, that may increase it at the next one.
Yeah.
Big difference if you make everything.
And so you might remember back in that. Yes, yes, it is. You learned the other day. Potentially. Yeah.
Or you can.
So just in a little bit of looking forward, Kim had some discussion with the school folks the other day, and if you are just looking at the number of kids currently in the system as they move forward in the high school, that number is expected to go down. Now, people who have their kids in homeschool, bringing them in could change that. People moving into the county could change it. But if we had the same cadre of kids that are currently like in second grade or whatever coming through, that number is going down just a little bit every year.
Yeah.
We're just not making as many babies.
That was part of the discussion that where it used to be, 3, 4, children, now it's 1. And then, similar to your conversation of what's moving in is not childbearing age group. So, accurate, yeah.
You were in that town.
Are you gonna go over the population did not reflect the.
Wait,
Oh, you went there at
the beginning?
Yeah,
Sorry. I would, say that it's more
The things like the penny count.
local folks.
That's what I was, that's what she was asking you.
Yeah.
I mean, I
They
have
started their families and many of them have remained in the county, even if they work outside, but many do work in and have had anywhere from 2 to 5 children. And so there's this bubble that we had
Oh,
on the schools and stuff, and now that bubble has started to decrease, apart from COVID. Apart from COVID. So, yeah.
And then we have two last things. Let's go. Of course, we discussed this a little bit when we gave this to you, but at the very end is 152 and 153. The findings.
While we're on our way.
Yeah.
132.
Okay.
That I really want to point out,
Mhm.
capital grants and contributions, see what happens when we go after the grant money and
Yeah.
stuff, and the impact it has.
I know.
I mean, I know a lot of citizens look at it, well, it's still our money, but from 18 down to 13, a lot of our money was going to other jurisdictions in the grant program.
We've got to step up to the plate.
Well, various agencies, departments, yeah.
But I mean, we went to play ball and then we received the money.
A really good point. And then I would note when you see this again, that would include the current fiscal year, you will see a bigger number for unrestricted investment earnings. So far, our investment earnings in terms of like SNAP and those kind of things, and the increase in the rate from Skyline is around 32,000. So makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kim went to go try to find another section that we're not sure why it's not in here. We're not seeing it. But in terms of the findings, of course, there were 2. So the first one, 152, yes, sir. Yeah, all right. Well, that's what I do too. So they should have controls in place to prepare financial statements in accordance with our current reporting standards.
And that's been the same one over and over.
Yes, the exact same language.
Find it?
For years. No, but I had what we had written. But I didn't find anything back from Scott. This is what I have.
No, they're actually, okay, I'll
Well, okay, audit, there's also a separate list of audit recommendations that we can go through with you. But in terms of this one, yes, you're right. That's the same one that has been there. And basically, they give us a long list of journal entries. What Kim and I found really interesting when we looked through it, we wrote Scott since our last meeting and had him send them to us. They include, to your earlier question, all the component units. So while there's some changes that are related to some of the how things are recorded here, there's also several related to the schools, related to treasurer's office, related to the EDA. So those are all kind of across the board.
Right.
So, and none of them, none of them to me are a flag that people aren't doing their job. It's just,
Correct.
this should be in this line as opposed to that line. And the fact is, some of you have pointed out that the school budget line items don't match terrifically with ours, makes that more likely to happen. So again, hopefully going forward, we'll fix that. And then the second one is the one about the
Need a big hammer for that.
yeah. So that one were adjusted after the monthly bank reconciling process. And essentially they're saying we really need to have someone in the mix that is a full CPA in some way to help us with making sure everything's presented exactly the way they want. And of course, Cindy was a full CPA, so that was part of why that wasn't that way before. Our recommendation, however, and I've talked to some other folks, I think we probably, Kim, we all recognize Kim and Jenny do need some help. And it would be great if that person had a degree of some sort in accounting, but I don't know, and I don't think Kim feels like it necessarily has to be a CPA, although that would be great, right? And I also checked with the same friend I mentioned to you. A lot of the folks here do use, in this part of the state, do use that third-party consultant to come in and get everything ready for them. And the amount they're suggesting, around 22,000, is about how much that is. Kind of what our recommendation is, instead of doing that, let's hire someone for, a little more than twice that, but get them all year to get some work done.
Yeah.
And we'll just put their work plan for a month or two before the audit is, you can sit in the room and get all this straightened out. So that's kind of more our recommendation. I did push back with Scott about I wasn't signing off on anything that committed that I was hiring a CPA or a consulting firm, because if he checks the statute, I do not have the authority to do that.
That's
So
us.
that's you. So I'm not going to sign anything that says I'm going to do that. And I wouldn't be appropriate even if you guys did something for the next budget year.
Yeah.
Until the next budget year. So he did say we could put something in about Munis is supposed to help with this. So I'll go ahead and put that in. Finally, there were a couple of other things. We have 5 more minutes. Sorry, I feel like I'm going on and on. So there is somewhere a page of audit recommendations from them. And when we get one, I don't know what it is.
Sorry about that.
So this is what our answers were when we were writing. So it might, I don't know if it's in the box. Maybe it's just okay. So the first one was for the county related to the statement of economic interest. And this comes up every year, a different version. So they said during our review of the required disclosure forms, we noted several were incomplete. And so in the past, our predecessor's view was it was the staff's job to get the pieces of paper in the door. How you all filled it out is candidly up to everybody. But we said that we would audit in the future for completion. So we will take that on as us doing that.
Fill out what applies.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently there were a couple that they said there were pieces, that everybody's was in, and most of them, there were a couple that were just slightly off timely, but most of them, they've been filled out and more timely every year. It's just not everything has been completed. So we said we would take care of that.
Well, I was
Yes.
going by the old way I'd always done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if you got a page that doesn't apply to you, you put your name on it and you mark everything no and go on.
Yeah. And apparently that's not the way you're supposed, according to them, not supposed to do it now. So yeah, then there was a second one related to the county year-end accrued invoices and accounts payable. During our audit, we found that the county was unable to generate a listing of accrued invoices and agreed to the amount accrued through the batch entry process. We recommend the county ensure that during the actual process, the proper documentation is available to provide the paper trail. And as you can see, that didn't land very well. And so the real answer is all the invoices were available and provided to them. And the fact that we didn't know we were supposed to put together a list, but actually did put together a list while they were here, we found this to be an inappropriate finding.
Well, we had it, may I? I'm sorry, we had it, it just wasn't in a format that was historically given to them. And it was a transition, you know, but it was provided with the invoices. So once we figured out how they wanted it, we're able to do it and give it to them when they were here.
That's the question.
See, that's been one of the reoccurring issues, like back to the journal entries. Everywhere Kim and I have ever been, and this has been private sector, other types of public sector, you know, it's very typical for your auditor to give you a bunch of end-of-year journal entries, if nothing else but for depreciation, because that's not something we do. But it's never getting those. It's never been a finding in any audit we've ever gotten. It's just part of. The last place I was at was a regional commission, and we got, I think the last year I was there, 50, and she had an accounting degree. She had never sat for her CPA, but that's all she had ever done was accounting, and we still got them, and that never showed up as a finding. He just say, here's the list, make the adjustments before I come back next time. Okay. So, you know. The next one, Board of Supervisors meeting minutes. I'm pretty certain this is the one I fought over the most. During our audit, we found that minutes for August 2022 were not available as of January 2023. So I already raised the question, why is January 2023 a part of the FY 22 budget or audit cycle? It's supposed to have delivered my audit by February.
Yeah, I had a question. I had actually emailed them and said, why is minutes apart? And the response I have, and I will find the email if you'd like me to, was because it's part of the accrual process.
Do we depreciate?
There you go. That's pretty, I was like this. And I said, maybe something I don't know. I passed it, you know, said, hey, Linda, help me. And she went like this. So both of us were sitting with tilted heads. So I'm not sure. So I tried. I tried to logically extract some reason. And there are requests or approvals that have expenditure related, you know, things within the budget. That's within the, you know, our process.
Minutes.
Within the minutes, thank you. That's the only thing I could think that's what they would need. But really the issue is it should be as of June 30th,
August.
not July, August, or anything, or even let's say July, because sometimes we have to make decisions. But from August on,
It's next
those
year's.
minutes were the ones that were saying that they wanted.
That's
And we
this
were
year's.
saying, what does that have to do with the fiscal year you're auditing? And so it went back and forth. Yes, exactly.
And, you know,
Would it
we,
have anything to do with-
no, I think
It was
what,
school transactions, wasn't it? It was probably school where we take and we do.
yeah, I think, you know, again, when I contacted some other jurisdictions and my CPA friend, their thought kind of was there might be some argument that you would have to have July and August because we're an accrual basis.
Right.
That there might be some things coming in. But anything beyond that is really, you would not go more than a quarter into the next year generally, right? Because then that's the next year. And again, I don't mean to minimize the fact that I mean, y'all know very well, we struggled a lot with that. But what our response was, and I did include Steve in this conversation, and he also was back to the one quarter at most. Anything beyond that is really should not be a part of the audit. So what we put is all FY22 minutes were provided for the audit. Due to staffing challenges, some of the FY23 minutes were not available during the FY22 audit period. Those were completed expeditiously, so by the time this was all done, they were available. But we did say video recordings for all meetings for both FY22 and 23 were made available on the website within 10 days of the meeting. And the meetings were also live streamed to ensure transparency. So if the argument is that we're not being transparent, that's not it. We weren't timely in our written minutes, but we did have an alternative. So if they wanted to watch it, or more importantly, the citizens wanted to, they knew what you were doing, which was the point you're trying to make. Real quick, then payroll taxes, 941. I believe we mentioned this to you when it happens, that when we transferred between staff, that was one of the functions that we just didn't realize we had to do. So, yeah, so that was, it says management agrees during a staff transition, the responsibility was not communicated in error. Once the deficiency was discovered, staff complied immediately. And while the forms were not completed timely, all taxes were paid on time and documented appropriately. All 941s have been brought current year to date. The next one is, I don't know what you go to the next one. There's just like 2, 3 more.
I have the email that
You do?
you responded to the minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay? As the county financials are reported on an accrual basis, we are required to evaluate all significant events after 6:30 for potential impact on the financial statement for inclusion and or disclosure.
So the next one relates to the journal. That's the one that I asked you.
System journal entries?
Yeah, system journal entries.
Yeah, during our audit, we found the county finance staff posted multiple journal entries that were not balanced. Some budget transfers were posted, and then we recommend implementing a review process to ensure all journal entries are properly balanced and posted to the correct. That was especially in the beginning when I was still trying to figure out myself, zeroing out departments and things of that nature. So that, so there's a process that I've put in place where, looking at the trial balance and ensuring that it's zeroed out. Then the next one we go to petty cash.
Sure.
The next one, during our audit, we found that the county administration lacked proper controls and documentation related to petty cash. And we found that expenditures included other corrections that were written in there. So, long story short, I got an email or a phone call that they stated they forgot to audit the petty cash
In January.
So I was like, okay. So he's like, I'm going to send Taylor and I, who said I'm going to come there. I said, okay. Taylor came. I said, what do you need? And the response was, I'm not sure. I said, okay. I said, well, do you want me to go down to the bank? I'm thinking being nice, making it nice, and download our bank statements from the petty cash. And he had a thumb drive. So I went for the fiscal year, put it on that thumb drive. Do you need anything else? Have a ledger from 2014.
Mm-hmm.
The same petty cash bank ledger from 2014. He made a copy of the fiscal year and he left. And then it says that we didn't have controls in place. There was nothing documented, and then certain expenditures that were written out. Now, the certain expenditures were, when I made, and my error not, payroll, when I had to write a check for somebody where
Correct.
there was a payroll
Right.
error.
But that was all documented in the, not just in the checkbook, but
Correct. Yes,
So it
so
was-
I had documentation of check written, copy of the check. I have a payroll book when I have any edits. I also have every bank statement because it still comes paper. I have it in a separate binder for EMS, petty cash, and the Virgil Allen. So I have all those. They never asked.
so,
So
you know, whenever Kim writes anything out of that checkbook, she always has somebody else come in and watch,
yes,
right?
so I make copies of it. Yep, I verify. So Linda and or Jenny. So I don't do anything. There's $1,000 in that account. That's it. We don't go above, we don't, you know, so.
Ask for that.
Yes. So I had called him about that and said, I don't understand. You know, oh, well, we'll take it. He didn't realize of the processes that I do have in place. The history since 2014 of what has been written, I just kind of followed suit, always with notification and or witness. And so it was, well, you really shouldn't do that.
What?
Shouldn't do what?
Well, certain, like the payroll,
So the two particular that he mentioned was you shouldn't write any kind of payroll type checks or any kind of lease payments out of petty cash. So those should be a separate check run.
Okay.
so
As a disbursement.
a lease payment was a difference in an enterprise bill. Written prior to me, doesn't matter, you know, and there was history prior to that. That, you know, kind of like those differences or human error, whatever it may be. There's been a history.
So he was saying that it should have been a disbursement and the check run.
It should have ran through AP, certain
Right.
things, and or payroll.
Gotcha.
And so our argument back was, well, we can do that going forward, but this is exactly how this has been done with several other folks.
And never, ever came up as a deficiency.
Well, he said that for a while he put it in, but since no one paid attention, they stopped putting it in. And since Kim and I were new,
He thought he'd put it. That was nice.
it's like, that's great.
Now-
Thank you.
You're reading from a list that we can't find in our audit.
I'm looking for, I will find it.
What
It
I'm
came in
saying
a,
is here,
We're getting ready to go.
it should have been in here.
Or maybe we're not.
It's not.
No, it's not.
That's good.
That might be when he's coming, maybe that's.
Well, that is the official finding, part of his finding, being here. Could it be that since it sounds like every issue is addressed,
oh, yes.
and since every issue was addressed,
That didn't need to be.
it didn't need to be in there.
Maybe not.
Yeah, which is nice.
Maybe. And then,
Or.
yeah.
I think the management summary.
No, I don't know. I will say that there was one more, which was the discussion of the fire rescue fund balance. And so that's when that came up. So that came out. Well, funny, everything from them is dated February 7th, which is another question I want to see. Kind of. Because
That is.
so on February 8th, we got a list of things they still needed to complete our audits. Additional things they still needed. And it wasn't just us, it was Missy had some things, I think schools had some things. And so
February.
So I think the question is, he says that we have issued our report dated February 7th.
Right.
And then he followed up with more deficiencies. So he signed an inaccurate audit by saying, I
Correct.
signed this on February 7th.
So-
Complete.
I've put in, says there are several things that I now have to sign and Ladina has to sign and send to state agencies. And so the question I put to Steve is like, okay, but really, February 7th was not the date this document was final. It was actually sometime in March.
So
Am I supposed to mark out, and his email says, please date everything February 7th. And so I haven't sent anything because I want to know from my attorney what dates actually. So that is, I mean, it's not just like a day or two. It's-
That's the whole firm. Interesting.
So
still
I
coming to
will
talk
wait
to
for
us?
an answer from Mr. Durbin before I send it. Well, the one, I think Ladina had some things that had to go, it's mostly state stuff. So that had to be done, those were all supposed to really been done in December, but nobody gets them in because nobody's audits are done in December anymore. But I have to send something to DEQ related to the landfill and a couple of things. She needs to send it related to the VITA grant, some of those kind of things. And then to your point about the clearinghouse, I think that was supposed to be by the end of February. And so he's waiting for me to sign off on those two material weaknesses and what our solution's gonna be. And I wasn't gonna, that's what this page is. And I wasn't gonna do that until. Right now, it's, I signed it and dated it April 11th, but I haven't sent it. Cause that was.
You.
First argument, even if it was completed in February, it's ridiculous that we're getting audit in February, those previous years. Oh, I know.
No, excuse me, we didn't get the audit until
They want to schedule a preliminary audit in June.
So what we did get on February 7th was our
of
first draft.
2022.
That we did get a first
Mhm.
draft on February 7th, and then the part that was, I would say, was maybe our error potentially is when we got that, we started these conversations and all of this. We waited and nothing happened, and so I finally wrote him and said, "What do I need to do to get a final audit?" And he
Right.
said, "Oh, just tell me." And that's all written down too. Okay, I'm telling you. So I didn't know I was supposed to tell him. I thought that was part of the deal, but whoever we have in the future, I'll be sure to tell them.
Come on up front. We definitely want it, as soon as it's done.
Well, not all that was good news, but this way, to your point, we're as transparent as we can be with y'all about this. There were some things. Yes.
No, there was some of shit.
There was
There's no one negating that. I'll look you in the eye. You know what I mean? Tell you. Yeah, and this does not assist in making the process any, with clarity or logic.
You got any questions? Feel free, let us know. Is that a
Did I mention I'll be
And Monday. And Monday.
Joe said, oh, it's good for this time.
Answer my question.
Oh, sorry.
That should be plenty. Your next meeting's the 25th, right? Is that, I want to make sure that,
That's what I read.
okay.
Yes. 4 o'clock.
25th.
So move?
Second,
On the motion to adjourn, Ms. Cookenbook,
Yes.
Ms. Bechtold,
yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yeah.
Mr. Booth,
Yeah.
and Mr. Turner.
Yeah.
It's